All right, for the final team in the NFC North, we had to change our clothes and change our setting. We had to change everything, Sam, because the Vikings are doing a lot of stuff here during the preseason, including having some injury issues pop up again with J.J. McCarthy's injury. So the pre-record didn't work. So here we are with some updated Minnesota Vikings analysis. Coming off a year where they did come back down to earth a little bit with that playoff year in 2022. They weren't winning all those one-score games as often last year. They had Kirk Cousins injured. They've moved on from Cousins. And we got to talk a little bit about that. They draft J.J. McCarthy in the first round, brought Sam Darnold in to be that bridge type of quarterback, hold the fort a little bit until J.J.'s ready. But unfortunately, after one impressive preseason outing from J.J. McCarthy, knee injury, he's out for the season. It's going to be Sam Darnold's show. So just give me, right off the top, your high-level thoughts on the Vikings heading into this year.
Yeah, it's a brutal blow for the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, they were a really interesting team this year, and they still will be, but for different reasons. But they'd finally put a stop date on the Kirk Cousins thing. They'd said, look, you're a good player, Kirk, but you haven't taken us where we needed to go. You keep wanting more and more money on these escalated contracts. Here's the line. This is how much we are willing to pay you, and anything more than that, you have our blessing to go and try and find it in free agency. And that's exactly what he did. The Falcons were willing to go higher. That's where he went. The Vikings were like, okay, we're positioned to go get the next guy. And I think they played that very well in the draft. They stayed disciplined. They stayed more or less where they were picking. They moved up one spot right at the end just to make sure that they got him. But they were able to get their guy, J.J. McCarthy, that everybody expected them to draft without, trading the farm to make it happen by trading up to 4 or 5. And then, as you said, really encouraging preseason debut. Okay, he made a mistake with an inaccurate pass and got picked off, but outside of that, he looked outstanding and looked ready. Looked like a guy that actually he could take the starting job from Sam Darnold sooner rather than later. Maybe we'll give him a week or two to get his feet wet, but he could be the starter for this team quickly into the season. And instead, that went from JJ's got a sore knee. We're going to take a look at it. The imaging, we'll go in with surgery. We'll see if it needs to be cleaned up. And then actually, no, it was torn meniscus. We're going to repair it properly, and he's done for the year. So it feels a little bit like the Jets a season ago where, we were all excited about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And then 4 snaps later, it's like, well, that's done for a year. McCarthy, the same thing. Like a lot of reasons to be excited for the Vikings. We're just going to have to put a pin in it and come back in a year's time, because that's when we're going to get J.J. McCarthy. Right now, it's Sam Darnold, and we can talk ourselves into that being encouraging. Sam Darnold's shown flashes here or there. This is the best. This is the best situation that Darnold's ever had, right? In terms of he's got Justin Jefferson now. His head coach is Kevin O'Connell, not Adam Gase. Like, there are reasons to be excited about Sam Darnold, but ultimately the chances are Sam Darnold is going to remain Sam Darnold, even with a better situation around him. And that makes the Vikings inherently less exciting, less interesting, and less good than they could have been this year if they'd got their rookie quarterback healthy.
We've always joked about Sam Darnold in his first 3 games where he's excelled, and he's had stretches of play throughout his career. Even his rookie season with the Jets, his last 4 weeks, he was excellent in 2018. But in 2021, his first 3 games with the Panthers, he was really good. In 2022, he didn't start until week 12, but his first 3 games were really good with the Panthers. The problem is he always came back down to earth. We'll see if he could put it together for a full season here for the Vikings. But you mentioned the supporting cast. It was the best supporting cast of any rookie quarterback. That's what we kept saying throughout draft time because of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson when he's back and healthy, and a good offensive line, and Aaron Jones at running back coming in as well. So they had a very uneven running game last year in Minnesota. Aaron Jones has a chance to tidy that up. So the supporting cast is solid, and we've seen Kevin O'Connell do a really nice job as head coach in leading the charge here and actually helping Kirk Cousins go from a guy that couldn't win, crunch time type of games to putting together all those fourth quarter comebacks in 2022. So from a storyline perspective, pairing Darnold with Kevin O'Connell. By the way, Kevin and I, KOC and I, we coached Sam Darnold back at Elite 11 in 2016. We have a rich history here. Check the mic, Kevin O'Connell, and Sam Darnold. Rich history that I had to reference. So at least Look, I think that part will be entertaining, but Minnesota on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of pieces, I think, to help Sam Darnold look good. We'll just see about that consistency that he has been unable to achieve over the last few years.
I'm sorry. Can we just return to that little nugget? You coached Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
What
I was on the
what coaching points did you impart on him?
I didn't work on his release because it would be much quicker. Yeah. I was more on the coaching staff that was evaluating the Elite 11 campers that year.
Okay.
But I was in the room. I was in the room with Kevin O'Connell and Trent Dilfer and Jordan Palmer, and we were grading the guys and everything. I was on the coaching staff, kind of.
Okay, so it was more that you evaluated and analyzed Sam Darnold rather than you took it upon yourself to improve Sam Darnold.
I'm also a 7-time keynote speaker at the Cool Clinic. There's no lies told in that as well. So yeah, don't just let me embellish a little bit.
Okay,
let's talk defense now. I've had enough of that. Defensively for the Vikings, we're talking about a team last year, the second worst PFF pass rush grade as a team for the Minnesota Vikings, and it showed in the scheme. We've discussed a lot about Brian Flores and how they rush 3 or they rush 6, and they lived in these extremes of blitzes and dropping 8 and trying to confuse offenses, and it was almost out of necessity, right? They had Danielle Hunter. They had no edge rush presence opposite him because Marcus Davenport got hurt, and they look to rectify that this offseason. Andrew Van Ginkel comes in from Miami. They trade up to draft Dallas Turner, and they essentially replace Danielle Hunter with Jonathan Grenard in free agency. Now it looks like a 3-headed monster of edge rushers. How do you think this defense ends up evolving here in year 2 under Brian Flores?
This is one of the most fascinating, individual units in the NFL, right? You've got Brian Flores' defense, which a year ago was making magic happen with smoke and mirrors. And then eventually they reached a point in the season where they basically ran out of smoke and mirrors and teams had figured it out enough so that the lack of talent on this defense was just too much to overcome, and it's like the defense ran out of juice late in the year. And you're right, this offseason has been a lot about, well, let's try and upgrade the talent across the board and, make sure that we don't have to rely on just smoke and mirrors endlessly. So there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of additions. You have, let's call it a swap from Danielle Hunter to Jonathan Grenard. And, they got younger, they got cheaper at that position, but then they did make additions. Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner in the first round of the draft, the guy that a lot of people thought was the best defensive player in this draft. I wouldn't have been one of them. I think Laiatu Latu was better, but still, a high-end first-round talent that they were able to come back and get after they got their quarterback. Then you've got Ivan Pace Jr. at linebacker, this fascinating sort of undersized bowling ball, human rocket that they had a year ago, a real surprise package. They add Blake Cashman in the offseason, another unconventional body type, short, stumpy arms, not your traditional linebacker shape human. They now have a pair of these guys in the middle. Their safeties are as good as ever, if not better, because apparently Theo Jackson has been a find for them. So now they've got Josh Metellus, Harrison Smith, Theo Jackson, Cameron Bynum, 4 or 5 safeties that they want to get on the field. And corner has been a complete plan B already. We haven't even hit the season, and arguably 2 guys that they would have wanted to start are not there for radically different reasons. Mekhi Blackman tore his ACL and he's done. And obviously the tragic loss of Kyrie Jackson in a car accident in the offseason. So just a wild degree of turnover, a wild now personnel group that they have in this unit. And the whole thing is still sort of contingent and hinging on what Brian Flores is able to do in year 2 with this scheme, having seen the end of year 1 start to get worked out a little bit.
And the corner room is fascinating too, because they had been so young, traded Andrew Booth during the preseason as well. So essentially giving up on the former 2nd-round pick, Kwesi's 2nd ever draft selection. And now you're looking at Shaquille Griffin and then the new signing of Stephon Gilmore in his early 30s, but still a pretty good player at this point, right at the time when corners usually drop off. But now, again, we're talking about how do you describe Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator? Sometimes we get into, well, here are the coverages that he calls. This is what he likes to do. Well, Flores at heart, when he was in New England and at Miami, likes to play a lot of man coverage. He likes to blitz 5, show the 4 and 5 man pressures and play man coverage on the back end, where he did have Stephon Gilmore in New England as part of that team. So Gilmore and Shaquille Griffin, the two guys that I think he would rather play more man, mix it up with all those safeties that you mentioned. That's Cameron Bynum. That's Harrison Smith. That's Theo Jackson. That's Josh Metellus. Love to throw those three safeties out there and mix it up last year. But now I think they can rely more on the four-man rush on the edge, try to play the man coverage that Flores wants to play. But yeah, you're right. From a just football X's and O's standpoint, I love it because you don't know exactly what they're going to throw out there, but I think you have an idea of what they're trying to do. Create that havoc up front, play man on the back end, and you're doing it with two veteran corners like Shaquille Griffin and Stephon Gilmore, who have played good football in the past, but we always talk about the volatility of the corner position. If the Vikings hit the high end of that volatility, this could be a really good defense.
And each of whom I think is better suited in a man cover scheme than they are playing zone. Like Stephon Gilmore has always been better playing man-to-man lockdown coverage. That's what he excels at. It's still what he's best at, even at this point in his career, given his age. And then Griffin, I think also his feistiness, his ability to be a man-to-man cover corner, I think that's his strength as well. So it's not the two guys they would have expected to go into the season as their penciled in starters, but they are two guys that theoretically fit well within what Brian Flores wants to do.
What would be your key position group here for the Vikings this season?
I think corner remains, maybe the key position for them, or if it's not corner, the one area that we haven't touched on for that defense so far is the interior of that defensive line. Edge rusher, they've upgraded. They've added 3 new bodies effectively. The interior still looks really weak on paper. And, the only additions really that they've made there have been lower down in the draft, much lower down. So, are they able to stumble into somebody? Does it matter if they're able to, just continue the creativity of last year with the upgrades of edge rusher talent? Are the interior, is it going to be strong enough simply through schematic advantage of being one-on-one the whole time? Or is that an area that is still going to drag this defense down and kind of limit what it can do?
Yeah, a few big names up front there. Jerry Tillery, Jonathan Bullard, Harrison Phillips, Jacqueline Roy. Keep an eye on rookie 7th rounder from Texas A&M Commerce, Sam. Levi Drake Rodriguez having a really nice preseason and looking like a find for the Vikings. Key position for me is those edge rushers I was talking about. Just want to see how they all work together. I think Van Ginkel's a very good player. He's reunited with Flores. The other part of Dallas Turner, remember when we were talking about the Falcons maybe drafting him at 8, the fact that Raheem Morris in Atlanta likes to drop his edges into coverage. Well, Flores likes to do that too, historically, if he has those pieces. Turner has that athleticism to be able to drop 50, 75, 100 times a year, maybe create some of that indecision for the offense, as well as rush the passer. So I just want to see that position group, because, again, I think the more they develop, the less blitzing we're going to see from this scheme from Flores. And then best and worst case scenario, what's the best case scenario here with the Vikings? We had to redo this whole thing because J.J. McCarthy got hurt. That was part of our best case scenario. But now the Sam Darnold Vikings, what does that best case look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it's actually that good for them if Sam Darnold looks really good. It's the worst thing that could happen for them, arguably, is they come out of this season and they're like, oh, now maybe we don't want to give the J.J. McCarthy the starting job because Sam Darnold's actually looked pretty good, but probably not good enough to be, amazing and a guaranteed starter going forward. Ultimately, I think their best case is probably respectability, a respectable showing, but next year is the important year. The defense, the real best case scenario actually is that all the defensive upgrades have meant that Brian Flores' defense is able to repeat what it did the first half of last year without ultimately being found out. When we get to week 12 or 13 this year, actually that's when Dallas Turner and Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman and the additions that they've made, that's when those guys can start to pick up the slack and prevent the kind of decline that this defense saw late in the season. And then the offense, we're sort of all agreeing is just, we've punted on this year. We're not going to see what that's really going to be like until next year with J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, I think best case wise, if you're just saying where do they land, sneaking into the playoffs with Darnold, getting instead of 3 good games, maybe you get 10 or 11, right? And there's still some duds in there, but you just get more consistent play where you become a playoff caliber team. Worst case, though, it's a tough division, man. And I think worst case easily is, they land in 4th and, the defense has some, they take their lumps, but really it ends up coming down to Probably Darnold's inconsistency up front, maybe the offensive line, maybe the interior is not as stout as it needs to be, and things kind of fall apart on that side of the ball.
It's big picture. That's almost a good thing, though. Like if this team, if it's just a catastrophe and Sam Darnold is a disaster and they end up winning like 3 games, that's a great draft pick that they're going to get to then, because they didn't give up next year's first. That was part
you're
of
just looking for the, yeah. You're just looking for.
I mean, that's not a bad
pick.
thing, right? Being able to add like one of the top picks in the draft to a JJ McCarthy led team next season, with the Sam Darnold experiment having been written off and moved on from. I mean, okay, it's going to suck this year, but Kevin O'Connell, I don't think anybody would be in danger of being fired, right? Because there would be an acknowledgement of we didn't have our quarterback we thought we were going to have, and okay, yeah, it was painful to suffer through, but now we get a top draft pick to go with this guy.
Even with all the injuries, the tragedy of Kyrie Jackson, even with everything going on, Kwesi, year 3, Kevin O'Connell, year 3, I do think they need to show a little more success, and I don't think they want to land in that 2, 3, 4 win bucket this season.